Hey, welcome everyone to ArchiCAD User, the monthly training webinar. This is Eric Bobrow speaking to you from San Rafael with my special guest, Chip Hudson from Alabama. How are you doing, Chip?
Good, great.
So, Chip, I'm delighted to have you on the series. I know we've had a little bit of contact here and there over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Just as I mentioned in a recent email, I heard about Chip's work through Josh Bone, who's a Graphisoft person who was presenting at one of their BIM conferences, and he showed some parts of Chip's template and showed how easy it was to lay out a kitchen using the kit of parts that Chip had set up. And I was very impressed with how well organized that was, and recognized instantly that it was a powerful approach. So I got in touch with Chip, and we had a little contact back and forth. So Chip, tell everybody a little bit about your background as a when you got started with ArchiCAD, and what type of work you do.
Okay. Residential designer, been designing houses since 1996. Got into ArchiCAD around 2000. When I come from AutoCAD, and the approach that I took when I got into ArchiCAD is I actually started developing objects before I actually started using the software within my practice. So I wanted to know the back end before to make sure that it could do all the capability that I wanted to do, because I was so used to working with AutoCAD and writing Lisp routines and streamlining, the software with AutoCAD. So once I made the transition, I've actually, back in the day, they used to have Objects Online, which I published many objects through Objects Online, and started selling objects as well. So kind of got into the development end of it from the back end. But like I said, primarily I'm all in residential design. We design houses from 1,200 to 12,000 square foot homes, and just utilizing really the BIM aspect that I knew where architecture was going, and that's why I took advantage of that, and it's just been really great ever since.
Excellent, excellent. I realize I didn't check to make sure everybody could hear us and see us. So just type in to let us know that you can see our webcams. I'm going to make Chip make you the presenter here. So it should be you should then have the opportunity to share your screen. Up to this point, we've just had the webcams on. All right, so I see a whole bunch of people, and tell us where you're calling in from. It's always fun to hear, where you're coming in from, Tokyo or Australia or the UK or whatever. So Michael in Seattle, and Lazaro from UK, and Bob from Australia, Keith from Colorado, yeah, Texas, Australia. Okay, excellent. Got a good crowd here. We got over 100 people, and I'm sure we'll have a few more because we are only 3 minutes after the hour. So excellent. So right now we're taking a look at, I guess, one of your projects, sort of a typical one for your work.
Yeah, this is one of our typical residential plans that we finished recently. It's one of the ones that I think you posted on your site with where we did the 3D renderings of. So, and this is just, like I said, we got the floor plan combination showing the floor plan elements of it. Where would you want me to start, or do you have an idea of you want me to dive into?
How about going into just the 3D, just to give us an overview of the project? Talk about it architecturally at least a little bit. What size? What is this for a specific client, or is it a spec home, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's just a custom home that we did, that we designed. It's currently under construction now. Had a lot of custom elements with the arches, and actually just introducing Versatech product into a lot of the moldings that we were implementing into the project. Wanted to do a material list and really keep track of cost in the construction of this home. So far everything's going great. utilizing a lot of the, I guess, the scheduling aspects of it. But yeah, as you can see around the project here.
So what size and square footage, and what would be approximate construction budget?
This one here, like I said, Alabama, we're looking at probably 320. And then the footage on here, if I go to tabulations under, let's do the framing. We're at 3,000 square foot, 669 on porches, car storage and porches. So 4,200 total under roof.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 320K in Alabama, probably $1.5 million in where I live. Yeah, you can get a lot of house there. So yeah, let's flip through your layout book and just give us a sense of how many sheets you do, because it seemed like you are able to get by with fewer sheets than a lot of clients, and I sort of a little curious as to, you know, how that's possible, because I've seen people with sheet sets much bigger for a house this size.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, once it gets through updating, we do a typical cover sheet with a flat elevation and give some 3D perspectives on the cover sheet, and then within our elevations, you know, we'll get into the detail aspects of the block, the brackets and gable details, you know, all your call outs on your elevations. And then we'll do like maybe a separate detail sheet showing a cut list and the rafter takeoff. We can get into that, showing the rafter cut list as you can see on the rafter takeoff. You know, we break it down by the nominal length, so that way the system's smart with you know, with the framers out there being able to pull from the right stock. Creates less waste versus just having a total number. They'll know that the 16 foot, and they need 19 of those. Then again, on our roof.
So we'll want to look at that in a little more detail later, because the way you've set up the nominal calculations, where it's figuring out, well, this is 11 feet 2 inches, so we'll use a 12 footer, that sort of thing is, you know, very, very useful. And
our roof plans, again, you know, we placed all of our plate heights for the framers, and this goes back to you know, when I was, you know, in a design build, my business, that's what we used to do, design build, and I really took on the asking the framers what made their jobs a lot easier, and got a lot of input from them, and then started implementing a lot of this practice, you know, with the design of the plans. And of course, it took off from there, and more framers started, subcontractors started referencing, you know, or recommending using me. And of course, you know how builders are, you know, they don't want to be sending their clients to their competition. And that's when I just really got out of building houses and stick to more to just the designing. But we'll do our foundation sheets, and then with floor plans with interior elevations, and then of course we use our schedules, you know, kind of a typical schedules as far as your counts for your plumbing and appliances. And then we'll do a duct layout, which in this case is you know, 2 stories, so a lot of it is in between the floors. So we had to coordinate with the floor joist manufacturer and make sure that we coordinated where our spans were and what direction they were heading, so that way we didn't run into any snags with putting beams in wrong locations and stopping our duct work from where they needed to go.
what size sheets are you using there?
These are 24 by 36.
Okay, and what scale is your drawing? Like if you go back to the previous drawing?
Typically a 1/4 inch.
But the ones that are, you know, showing the mechanical?
Yeah, the mechanical is 1/8 inch scale, And then, for our, floor joists and ceiling joists, we'll do an 1/8 inch scale. And then, of course, in our floor plans, we'll do a 1/4 inch scale. And then again, on electrical, we always use a count in our electrical that will tell, showing the symbol and the quantity takeoff of all of our, outlets and plugs and etc.
Now you say renovation status is on the schedule there, or is this a remodel?
No, I use these schedules for both renovation and new construction. So everything is in the new construction, it will always say existing. But when we do renovation, we do use those filters here, so therefore they'll know which part's being taken out, which ones, what the count is going in.
Okay, is there just at first glance, I'm wondering if you have thought of cropping that so it doesn't show that last column.
I have, but speed is the main thing. So we hadn't moved it, and sometimes it will clip off, our notes here, and this is what we do right here: to be demolished, base options, news, and existings, everything else. So we kind of put a note up here for what this is referencing.
Okay, but so you leave the schedule alone. In other words, you don't say, "Hey, this is a new one. We don't need that field." You just leave it in there, and it's never seems to get in the way.
Well, a lot of times we're tinkering with settings a lot, with counts and things like that. And if I did another renovation schedule, then it'd be a 2 that we'd have to keep up with. And when we get into rearranging some things, then chances are you'll forget to update the one that you need when you put it in there. So that's why we just keep the KISS theory.
Okay.
But yeah, and then our last is our framing sections and cut throughs. And then we'll do a floor, and we use this as a slab, 1/2 inch thick slab, as doing our quantity takeoffs for our flooring, covering flooring. And then we'll have the schedule as well.
So for the covering flooring, you're doing just the finished floor as a separate slab on top of the other?
Correct.
Okay. So keep going. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions. So for those of you who've been on these calls or other presentations that I've done before, I encourage you to type in questions. I will sometimes answer them directly in the chat, but often I'll just save them and then ask Chip, for example, to clarify something. So anything that's either unclear or you just want to know how he does something, please put it in. I did see a question about framing. How do you do your framing? That I think what would be interesting to see how you're doing that. I'll just read off some of these questions. We can just sort of incorporate them as you move through. Is the information all parametric? How long did this work take? Comment from Jim Team saying, we use a renovation status of new in our plan. So instead of saying, existing for a new design, he just makes everything new. Let's see, do you use CAD image for electrical plans? Is most of the work for design build or design bid build? And is brick rowlock still a profile?
Yeah, complex profile or brick rowlock, but it's I use it until they updated ArchiCAD where you can actually take off quantities from a complex profile. So I'm starting to get more into breaking those calculation surfaces down, as opposed to before, it always took off the one, the solid element, even though you had multiple elements within your complex profile. But that's exactly what that is. The brick rowlock is a complex profile, and it's separate. It's I just use it as a brick rowlock itself. If I go to the wall tool, let me go here, and I have these all set up. Our swoop walls, but our rowlock is here. And I generally, I'll create the rowlock as small as possible. So therefore, when I stretch it, it'll stretch to, maximum amounts. Because sometimes under the window sills and things like that, it'll require, you may have to scrunch it down to fit it. So I want to make sure I can fit it out. And then this
Okay.
becomes more usable across each project that we go through.
Okay, I see 2 brick rowlocks, one with the number 1 after it, or is that just because of?
I was playing with flipping because I found that, when I started in ArchiCAD, as you see, when I go to the floor plan, I do things a little different. My reference point is onto the inside. You see the reference point is to the inside, because a lot of times, we do a lot of publication printing for our plans, and we'll get a lot of requests for, like in our typical area, we use 2x4 stud walls, but we may get, a 2x6 request to do a 2x6 wall. So we'll have to come in and modify this plan. So I've always found that finding the reference point to the inside of the wall, then anytime that we change the exterior, we can change to a 2x6, and it grows outward from that reference point. And that's kind of picked up and stuck with us since I think 6.5 ArchiCAD.
Interesting. So let's just see. What about the framing? Can you show us a little bit about how you do the framing? Just is it done piece by piece? Is it using an add-on? Well, I guess you have the framing in all of the.
Yeah, we'll do our span, but this is just, it's an object that as you stretch it, it'll, we stretch it out to our points. And then of course we just look at the span table to it gives you an option here. And we took an object and we've done some editing and created our own little style. So when we pull up this object, we can specify it here on what it is and what type of lumber, and then we can change the spacing, and then of course it does a calculation for our schedules.
Okay, so so this is a custom object that you created for your own use, and is this one of the ones that you were selling through Objects Online back in the day?
No, because it was kind of a derivative of a person that I knew that created the count of this, making the spanning, I guess, of the spacing, and then all it did is took their object and edited it. So I never had full rights to be able to sell it. The main object that I've always sold was the if I go to the exterior elevation, is the cornice object. The cornice object is the one that that I love so much, and this is it here. You could take this object here, and if I want to change it, to a Greek return or a Greek return only, I can do a box return, rake cornice, rake return. You can specify if you want trim. You can also create your own trim and replace it. And then the object also is stretchable, and if you want to change your cut angle, you can do that on the fly as well. And all this is, and then I have
So this object you created and you sold through Objects Online, which is no more. Do you still make it available to people?
I still have it for sale, that I sell it.
All right. So where would, if imagine that there are a few of these that you have, where would one make the purchase?
Well, right now we just changed our website over to a new website, and I'm in the works of putting this back up on the site to be able to purchase online. But yeah, all you do is you log in there, and you can purchase it online. Anybody can send me a request, or anybody that's interested in it, I can give them some information on it.
Right. Well, just send me the information. I'll post it as part of this, the recording for this. So that's available. And I guess how much is that particular object you sell it for?
$80 is what we
Okay,
have.
all right.
$80.
And I know part of your business model is that you for some of the designs, you actually sell them as a set of plans. So for
Spot
people who don't
plans.
want to hire a designer or just want to get it customized a little bit, they can buy a set of plans.
Kind of like the mail order plans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's another type of business that I think most of the people watching are not involved in. It is an interesting thing in terms of ArchiCAD being able to, create something that can be used in other contexts. In terms of the framing, so you showed the floor framing. What about wall framing and roof framing?
Yeah, our roof framing here, I've got it on a layer here on our rafter plan, and this is where we go in and typically it gives you the basic elements, but we also attach a flag to it, which is a label, but the label has 0 2D elements to it, so it doesn't show anything. But that's how I attach that's how I attach to be able to extrapolate information from the object itself. If you associate a label to it, then you're able to pull the information from the object and it becomes parametric anytime you change it, and it'll update. So therefore, when I do that,
Well, let's back up a little. Let's back up a little bit. If you create the roofs, you've got a design for the roofs. How do you approach creating the framing? Is it using the roof wizard that Rafter provides?
Yeah. If I take here and delete this and just start from scratch, we do it from the roof, and of course we go through the same roof wizard, and I've got it. These are pretty much all set up here. Then I hit OK, and then as it generates the rafters.
Is it still thinking, or is
Yeah.
it go on to a layer that's hidden?
Oh, it says unreleased.
There we go. Okay.
The other story. So then what I do typically is then I've got a setup here in my schedule. It's a display. Yeah, Rafter display control. Now these are pulling straight from the objects, but I've got up here, that this is going to be, you checkbox. And every time you run through this, it'll have to refresh. We change it to match the settings that we typically use in our plans. So then when we get back to the object, all of our settings are in place.
So just as an explanation to everyone watching, what Chip's doing is he's running a schedule. So if you just hold for a minute while I explain it, because I think it'll help people to understand. So when you run a schedule, frequently you're saying, list every element, every door, or sometimes you say list certain windows together, like there are 4 of these type windows and 2 of those type windows, so you group them together. Now the grouping can be based on a variety of criteria. Most commonly, is it the same window type, like it's a slider and it's the same size? Okay, that's identical. But you can reduce it down to just saying, just tell me how many windows I have, or tell me how many framing elements I have. So it basically can say, well, you have 100 of them, you have whatever. What Chip did was he did a schedule that says, just give me all of this type of element, all of those framing elements. Initially, they were just dropped in. They didn't have any differentiation for the particular criteria that he had listed. So they were essentially all considered identical. He then went in and made some changes, as you saw, to some parameters that said, you know what, these things that are don't have any data, let's put in some data. And you were specifying the size of the text and where the text is in relationship to the element. In other words, is it halfway, etc. And all of a sudden, all of those elements now have certain parameters. Now the automatic labeling, where did the labeling come from? Are these objects the standard objects that have labels already pre-associated? What's the how did that happen?
Yeah, they're all the standard. These are standard objects here, and and then when you go into display lumber size, this is where you can start positioning, and that's where that 4 inches come in at when I saw. So what I did is when I create the schedule, you go into, you can actually pull the object and actually pull parameters, specific parameters out of the general objects. And this was one of the options too. Here's this is select size to show, and we do rounded lumber size, and then or you can do lumber cut size. But because that we do a cut size on our Rafter links,
Can you show just that one particular one that you've got selected as a cut size? Or you've got all of them 236. So
yeah, if I go into
you suspend groups and select.
Yeah.
So the text that's on there is a standard part of the Graphisoft object?
Yes.
Okay, because I know you, for some of your objects like the cabinets, you showed me how you have taken their parts and added some smart stuff to it.
So yeah, it's changed it from 17.6 to 17.4.78, 17.4 and 7/8.
Oh, there it is. Okay, it was I didn't see in the yeah. Okay, cool. So so you're using the Graphisoft built-in framing wizard and modify it as needed. So what about, do you do wall framing?
No.
Okay.
Well, we do with the sections and when we cut the sections, but we don't draw the wall framings in.
Okay, so when you cut a section, are you using complex profiles or to show the plate, or are you not showing the framing in the section, or what?
Yeah, we'll just use symbols and apply symbols over the top of the walls. And because we use a lot of nominal size, with our construction, then we've created a cut list or the cut object. So when I go into the objects here, I've got the cornice object here. So, so I can specify nominal size, or I can do actual size, and then I can specify what they are, and that's what we normally do in our section cuts and our wall section.
All right, so that's a 2D element. Is that one that you created, or is that a standard?
That's one I created.
Okay, all right. So we do have a bunch of comments, questions here. So let's see. Nick Peckham says, "What are the red lines?" So I'm not sure. Oh, guess maybe he's talking about the reference line of the roof. So basically, assuming that that's the question, Nick. So when you're drawing a roof, you specify either manually or it infers it from the way you're drawing. What is the reference line? It's commonly the plate height, but it could be related to any line in space. And that does not print, but it is something that does help you control the roof. And you can turn it on or off using the, if you go to the view menu chip and just turn off the roof. So on-screen view options. And we go to, what is it? Roof pivot lines. If you turn that off, then they go away. So it won't ever print. And you can say if it's not useful to see it, you just turn that off. If you do want to adjust roofs or select them, it can be helpful. All right, let's go on to some other questions.
And for those that are watching that are from the old school ArchiCAD, as you can tell, it may look a little backwards with the view map on the left side. I get a lot of that.
Okay.
Person's on the right.
Yeah, well, I think you get comfortable with it on wherever you want to put it. All right. How do you use 3D to coordinate your ducting and framing? So that'll be an interesting questions. And are the details connected live to the 3D model? So I know you had some foundation details there. So those are two somewhat different
Yeah, our
questions.
foundation details we use as external Hotlink drawings, where we have a lot of our case scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we insert this on our sheets, then all we do is reduce our sheet down to which detail we do. So that's an unlinking one. But then when in the foundation plan, we have a symbol that we insert on our foundation that will reference that detail. As far as the cornice details, we do.
Wait. Let's slow it down because I think some people need more time to recognize what's going on. So
Okay.
can you go to the sheet that has those details?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll show how so that's the overall worksheet, which has a whole bunch of different variations. Each one of those drawings is a little different context, a little different setting. So you've pre-made or just created all these variations that suit your typical projects.
Correct.
Now go to the actual layout where the details are placed
On the sheet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can see there are several details in the upper left corner. If you select any one of them, you'll see that it is a manual crop. It's got all of those other details next to it. So basically what Chip is doing is he's got essentially some pre-made, preset details that work perfectly well for these types of projects. And he's just saying, here is where I want this one, here's where I want that one. So it's like your detail book that you're dropping onto the sheet.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the linking, so let's go back to your linking where you chose which one, that marker. So how is that set?
All that is a object. So we go into our object, and then I've set up either it's a perimeter, a step footing, or like a thickened slab with it, which would be a grade beam. So then we could just do perimeter. We can control which is the fold out direction, and then we specify if it's an A1, A2, A3, A4 custom, and then we can specify what we want to name it. So then once we place it, we'll just draw the line and mark it. It's just, to us, it's just those kind of things. It's because we sell a lot of plans online. Of course, if I designed a home and it's designed in Alabama and somebody builds it in California, then there's going to be a lot more of the structural elements that may change in it. So that's why we use a general base for our details.
Okay. So I can see that the call out now becomes something you have to manually coordinate, but certainly you've got, it's very quick to do that.
I could place that as a independent detail to where I can reference the sheet, the worksheet versus putting a symbol. But it's just, to us, it's always been faster just to, because when you go to make a copy of it, because if I was going to go around this whole house, I can just copy and place, and then come back around and then change what they needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's see. So in terms of your model, you've got an interesting hybrid between, or your projects, you've got an interesting hybrid between having a lot of stuff truly in 3D, with some smart parts like that cornice that you created and the framing, et cetera, and being scheduled automatically to cut lengths. On the other hand, you have, some significant parts of your annotation sort of automated in terms of just like quick settings, but still manually coordinated. So it's an interesting thing that you've worked out, at least. I'm sure you have a good QA checklist for verifying things.
Yeah, everybody that we use a BIM server, And within all of our projects, we have another independent worksheet, which is what we call our checklist. So everything has a checklist. As they go down, we check out all of our typical elements that we do for each project.
Oh, no, this is very interesting because I've never seen this done in this fashion. So right now you've got a list of this particular, what we're looking at here are a set of the squares are actually smart objects, right? Or
so they always like, so if a draftsman would take this, they would always go to the first one and click it. And then as they completed this task, does the hot water heater have access? Things like that. We find that we need to make sure we have checked, ceiling heights properly labeled. And as they go through, they mark them off. And then they also have an option that if it's, not required, it's an X. So they'll, like I would X out certain things, like if we were doing a deck or something small project, we wouldn't have necessarily even worry about a hot water heater or anything like that. So I would X that out. So when I would share the project online through BIM server, they're able to pick up and see, who left off where, and they can also check it off as if it's started. So if one of my draftsmen got in here and they never completed it, then they know that, okay, the flooring labeling and note the floor breaks in the open rooms, they started it, but it's not finished. So we know somebody else needs to come back in and finish that.
Okay. Now the list here, is that just text on the right?
Right here in this. Yeah. It's all text. And then these are just boxes that we've placed for placeholders. And then we have it
between the blue and the red. Blue is what's needed and red is what's done.
Typically, like I would do the blue, and then a draftsman would do the red. This particular project, we were working together on it, so we both kind of took on the blue. But typically, what I would do is have anybody that's in teamwork that's outside the office, I would have them use the red, and anybody inside the office would use the blue. So that way, somebody's working on this project in the office and it's blue, then we know, okay, who's the one that completed this task, and we just, it just grows, from everything from our roof plan, rafter plan, interior elevation, site plan, cornice, sections, exterior elevations, and it doesn't cover but we find that by having a list, it helps you think of other things, and it helps you, okay, once you check this one thing, you say, oh, I didn't, we need to maybe note this too. So that's where we found this very helpful. So it certainly doesn't cover, everything in the plan, but it gives a general
it's a very systematic way to do it, and it's right part of the project, and it's in a worksheet, so it's not affecting any speed or any quantity. It's just basically there to keep you on track. So let's see here. I'm looking at questions. Okay, Greg Pickworth, we're going back to the dimensioning of stuff. It says, coming from metric dimensions in Australia, the use of feet and inches is interesting. Yes, we have an interesting archaic standard here. What's the site? Scott Buchanan asks. So I'm not sure exactly what he means, but are things generally pretty flat there? Do you have some sloped sites? What's the situation?
It's generally pretty flat. Here, of course, in Alabama, we've got I think it's about a 1/2 inch frost line. So you can pretty much, place a footing is about as deep as you can kick the dirt up. So there's not a lot of real detail with stem walls and things of that nature.
So let's see. So Todd Hotchkiss asks, the roof wizard thing, please explain. So without you going back to doing it, let me just give the 1-minute explanation for those people who looked at it and went, whoa, I didn't know what he was doing. Basically, there is a built-in set of tools for creating roof framing, overall called the roof wizard. You basically will draw one or more roofs, your whole roof system, select the roof elements, and then you go to the, I believe it's under the design menu. And in the design menu, there's design extras, and then underneath there's roof wizard, or maybe it's roof extras or something like that, but it's under the design menu. You have to pre-select the roof elements before you do it. And then you can either say, hey, I would like to put just a series of rafters, or I'd like to put, there are different sub items, or you can do the wizard, and the wizard basically has a whole set of options. So when you do that, it creates a whole bunch of objects that match the current geometry of the roof. In other words, it looks at the roof slopes and the roof outline, and it puts in things based on rules. Once you do that, you can actually move or change the individual elements because they are objects, and you can list them. So it's a quick way to get the basic framing set up. So that's built into ArchiCAD for, well, probably going back to like version 8 or 10 or something like that. And it's found under the design menu. If you have one or more roofs selected, you'll be able to experiment with it. All right. Question from Jim Teams. Why do you use the background grid as on all the time? Do you lock to grid in most instances?
No, it's just for zooming in and zooming out. It helps me know off the cuff that, sizing and because when you're panning and zooming, sometimes you'll be zoomed in, and without that grid, you're just like, well, how far am I exactly zoomed in? And then when you type out a measurement, it goes flying off into infinity. Then you realize, well, you're pretty zoomed in.
Right. Okay, good. So I know we're going to get to the cabinet stuff in a little bit, Joe. And John Chando, show us your template. We're going to be looking more specifically at the template, what's in the template versus what's in a specific project. Let us see here. There's a question from Chris Illiff for iLife saying, how do you do the B and B? So I'm not exactly sure. Do you know what he'd be referring to with B and B?
I'm guessing board and batten.
Okay.
I'm guessing that all it is a vertical texture line.
Can you just show that in 3D and then we can sort of discuss that?
I'm guessing that wall here.
Okay, so that wall, that's just purely a 2D texture on it?
Yes. And
Okay.
then this is the complex profile that sits on top, and this is where I can stretch it, to the bottoms of the windows. So these are just segment pieces.
All right, so you've got the base walls, and then you've got the stone outside that is stretched. And then what about the bottom section that connects up? So that is a separate wall.
Yeah, based on the elevation of the story that it's set in.
Okay, and the vertical board and batten, then if you highlight a wall and select it, so it basically is just a flat surface that has a picture that makes it look like it has that, and then you've aligned it. It looks like that's got a nice clean alignment at the corner, or is it? Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, if I go to 3D Explorer, I'll have the corners put on it, and then this is just another complex profile with the banding.
So you just changed. What did you just change when you said 3D Explorer? What is that?
This is
more detail.
It's a layer combination. So when we send it out to BIMX, so it's got furniture, things of that nature that we normally wouldn't have in our working drawings.
I see. Okay, so you call it 3D Explorer, and it's basically a presentation model.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right. So Jim says, could you show a cut wall section as to detail? By the way, how are you all liking this so far? I think we're seeing some pretty interesting ways that Chip has optimized his workflow, and we haven't even scratched the surface of what's in the template and the scheduling and things.
And then these are these cut symbols. And
That's
then of
purely
course,
2D.
yeah, these are 2D, and this is pulled from the model, which is a complex profile using crown molding. And then of course our base. And we use different bases. We have the base with the quarter round or half round. I mean the quarter round for our different flooring types.
All right. So your TJI there is those are 3D. Your
Yeah,
joists.
those are the floor joist objects that we play. That we were going over the spans.
Okay, so you just sort of do them in groups, however they need to be cut.
Correct. And I do have separate ones that I use if if it's like a 45-degree wall and we're trying to cut it in, then I'll infill with loose objects.
Okay. Does that look like one of them is sitting off the outside the wall on the left?
Yeah, it goes beyond that wall.
Okay. So and then what about the exterior wall section? Let's take a look at that with all of the rowlock and everything.
Yeah, like this one here. We use a sub fascia and aluminum wrap, and then we've got it kicked off with a freeze board, a 1x4 and backer with a 1x6 on top, so the siding goes back behind. And then again, these are the symbols that we use for our headers, top plates, cut throughs, and then this is where that rowlock comes into play underneath that banding.
So you're showing the cladding on the outside, but you're not actually showing the drywall?
Correct. This is just an exterior wall.
So the interior face of that wall is just colored the right way, but you're not actually showing it in the section?
No, we don't. We keep it. Of course, coming back in the old days is when you dimension and you had too many lines together at too close, it always seemed to anchor to the wrong point. So we started classifying our cladding on an exterior wall, but we didn't go in showing the sheetrock on the inside because these are nominal 4-inch walls anyways.
Oh, okay. And so your interior walls are they shown as a composite or as just a simple volume?
Yeah, they're a composite, but as a fixed width, but but then there's no skins applied.
Okay, so you're using the composite tool, but you're setting it as a nominal, the 4-inch thickness, and not showing the actual cladding. Now, are we seeing? I guess we're cutting through an opening, and so we're seeing some casing. Is that?
Yeah, that's the case with the header.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Excellent. All right. Let's see. Question from Georgiana about the Roof Wizard. So assuming Roof Wizard only works on elements created in the Roof tool, is there a smart tool that does something similar for elements created with the Slab tool for flat roofs and floor joists? So the answer is, I don't think Graphisoft has ever created one for that, and I'm not sure if there's one. CAD Image does make a very powerful wall framing tool for people who do want to do wall framing diagrams or drawings and counts. But one trick I've seen is sometimes people will use the roof tool for slabs because you can just make it literally zero slope, and then you can use the Roof Wizard. So I haven't seen it done often, but I've heard people say that it can work okay. All right, so I'm seeing some comments. Awesome, very cool, really nice, good to see. Um, Durval says, how do you make the layer combinations pop up in the middle of the screen? I think you're just using the pop up at the bottom, or the
It's
quick.
using the quick set.
Yeah,
Quick,
yeah.
yeah.
So Durval, in ArchiCAD, when did it start? 20? When they changed the quick options, it used to be sort of a small palette underneath your navigator, often placed underneath, the view list, to this. Now it's a strip at the bottom of your screen. And so all of those little things that we're seeing that say roof plan, just can you highlight move your mouse down to the bottom where it says 05 roof plan, entire model, HHD pen set, all of them are pop-ups. One of them is the layer combination, one of them is the model view option, there's graphic overrides, etc. So that's where that's coming from. It's recently added version 20, I think. Okay. John Chandros is nice, very similar to how we do it. That was from 5 minutes ago, so related to probably how you're doing the walls nominally. Paul Adams says, very helpful to see different ways to approach the design and drawing work. All right, and other comments about very interesting. What are the computer specs? Asks Rich Matthews.
What's that?
What are your computer specs? What are you running?
Ooh, it's a built from scratch. I have to see. Let me pull that up here. $16 gigs of RAM, Intel iCore 7 7820X.
So it's a nice computer, but nowadays 16 gigs of RAM is not uncommon, and so it's just basically you have a good computer. Let's see, the Dennis Hellier says staggered at the level of detail, all parametric. Certainly, yeah, Chips got things dialed in. Roderick Anderson's, hey, Roderick, says some interesting stuff. By the way, Roderick was our featured guest a couple of months ago. So nice to see you sitting in there, and we can all learn from each other. He says some interesting stuff to bring into our template. Was just working yesterday on a new revision of our template for some new projects, and even though our project types are quite different, there are some really good applications here. So always good to share some smart stuff with each other. Jim Belisle says, great technical information. I was wondering about the roof ridge lines that seem to offset. How does the structure accommodate this? And by the way, Roderick Anderson does confirm that just if you set the roofs to flat, you can use the Roof Wizard. Joe Archibald says CAD Image no longer makes that framing tool, but someone else has one, but he can't think of whom. All right, and a lot of other comments about cool and interesting. What's the file size? So if we can go back to the roof ridge lines question, they are offset. How does the structure accommodate this? Do you know what he's referring to in terms of it being offset? Well,
No.
he's asking about the roof ridge lines. Now, I notice if you turn back on the pivot lines.
Oh, yeah. I've got them set to all vertical where, yeah, you're talking about where you could see the offset of that plane. Is that right? If I'm reading that right?
Can you turn back on in this view menu on screen display options, on screen view options?
Right.
And the roof, one down, one up, there you go, and then roof pivot lines. All right, so what we're seeing right now for most of the roofs is that they're on the face of the wall, but we do have the ones that are maybe it's a dormer or something like that in the top center that look like they're further away from the edge. Is that because the walls are actually inset, or what's the story like at that top center area?
I got you. Yeah. So the way we, let me get over to this one. we pitch all of our roofs to the inside of that wall. So the roof is here and that pivot lines to the inside of that wall. So when
Okay.
you look at it over here, the cleaned up, you can see that these lines are actually pitching here, but it's this one's very far off because actually there's like a knee wall that this is pitching off of, and it's raking
Can we
down.
just see that in context? So that particular one back where you have the real building.
So if I went to
There we go.
pitching,
So it's supported by those interior walls, and then you have this cavity space. Is that storage or what is it?
yeah, it's a dead space of where we had a closet on this side, but we ended up actually taking this wall out and increasing that bedroom size.
So what supported the roof? Did you actually just frame it based on the outside?
Yes, I mean it's pitched here, but from our pitch point lines to get our ceiling height where that ceiling height line was going to be, that's where we placed that pitch line.
Okay, so to to clarify from a sort of training perspective, the reference line can be placed anywhere you like. Most commonly it's on something related to the wall. It could be the outside face, it could be the outside framing, it could be the inside framing or the inside face. Those are common things. And if you do it in one of those places, you may say, oh, that's the plate height. So it is the actual plate height that you're referring to. But technically that line in space can be anywhere. You're just saying this line, it's at this height. So the fact that a chip is putting the line based on those interior walls, even if those interior walls maybe aren't the support, aren't the structural support, or not what you'd call the plate height, it's just a convenience for how you define, in this case, in relationship to the ceiling height that he wanted to achieve. So it's not structurally any different than what you might think. It's just from a control, this is where he's setting the height. So
yeah, from the build point of, so when we go into our roof plans, like after we have this roof drawn, that's where we go into our label, our interactive label, and we choose that this is an object that we've made that extrapolates the information from the roof. So when I select all the roof and I click apply label, that's what the information that I want to get is the plate height in the roof pitch.
Okay, that's we want to look at that a little bit more. I just want to explain something for Scott. You're saying pitch point. Do you mean the baseline of the wall where the bird's mouth sits?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And Todd Hotchkiss has his comment. I'm jealous about your 2x4 roof thicknesses and lack of frost footings. So yeah. Alabama doesn't quite get the same snow as you would have. Todd, I think, might be in Iowa or something like that. How did that affect the fascia height? Scott asked. So fascia is, let's say, the simple way that you draw a roof in ArchiCAD is you have a uniform volume that includes the shingles or top cladding, the plywood, whatever space you have for insulation, and if you did have an interior ceiling, or if it was a slanted ceiling, you might include that. When you take it out to the face of the building or beyond with an overhang, then that fascia, the natural fascia of the element, is whatever that works out to vertically. When you're actually designing something for final, what it's going to be seen, you might put a board on the edge that makes the fascia a different dimension. How do you approach your fascia and soffits and things like that?
Once we design, we commonly go 9, 8.5, which allows that the plate be placed on top of the common ceiling joist at 5.5 inches. and then we base that rafter off the top of that point. So it kind of picks the rafter tails up, because a lot of our windows, we'll header them out at 8 foot on a 9 foot ceiling. But if you got a 10-inch pitch, then of course your eaves are going to be killing into the top of the windows.
Mm-hmm. So can you show a 3D cutaway of one typical section where we can see how the soffit and fascia work? So you have the fascia and the soffit. Is that one element or is that multiple elements?
No, that's the object.
That's the object. Okay, and
that's cornice. This whole cornice is an object. So I could take this object, these two objects here, and if I wanted to specify that it's going to be a 1x4 shingle strip, freeze board, I want to do a 1x8, I can change that on the fly.
Okay, so for those of you who don't have objects like this, I mean, obviously, is this one of the ones that you sell,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
Like
if I want to do a trim profile, and you can control all of these variables here, showing the soffit. If you wanted to put it a 1/2 inch reveal, if you want to rake fascia,
so very slick, all of the options that you've got built in. What I want to just take a moment is just to say, if you didn't have an object like this, how would you approach it? And so just from a training perspective, I'll just say you could get most of this effect with let's say, a single complex profile that would define the whole shape. Essentially, you draw the cross-section of it. And that could be done with the beam tool, and when it meets the corner, it would meet the other beam. And there are some limitations with that compared to the object approach, but for the most part, that would be, that's what most people will do. All right, let's see. Russell says, I notice he has a structural plan and a roof plan on the same floor plan. Is this a copy or a reference view?
What's that?
Okay, so comment is, I notice he has a structural plan and a roof plan on the same floor plan. Is this a copy or a reference view? So we're seeing some stuff in gray.
Is the one I just copied over here, the roof plan.
No, but on the right, there's a bunch of stuff that's in gray that's just, I think that may be the reference. You have a trace reference turned on?
Trace reference.
So can you turn that off for a moment?
Let me find that menu. I think it's behind, there we go. It was behind the go-to meeting. There we go.
All right, there we go. So basically, at any point for any useful purpose, you can say show a particular view or a particular story as a trace reference, and that certainly is intended to help you coordinate information. And then you can turn it on or off with that little icon box. Scott Buchanan says, I need these cornice details. All right, looks like you got a buyer there, Chip. So we need to get your e-commerce site working again. And
we use it every day, and I tell you, we love it. I mean, it's really works well.
Yeah. So yeah, just give me the link as soon as you have that, and we'll put that up.
Okay.
All right. So Scott Menard says, I guess I should say, should the location of the roof plane baseline and its predefined eave, overhang, and subsequent fascia board determine how the corner connections are completed in the model? Chip, do you have an answer?
Now, are we talking about the cornice again, or?
Yeah, I think so. Does the location of the roof plane baseline and its predefined eave or overhang and subsequent fascia board determine how the corner connections are completed in the model? I think you're just placing your corner element in the right relationship to where the sort of base element is.
Yeah, well, how the corner meets up. I'll just do one here. Just take. These are all done by stretching. Now, if they're irregular overhangs, you can specify, if I went into this object and I specified a complex, see it's under simple miter, but if I went to a complex miter, I can actually do each one to mend that outside or inside corner if they're two different overhang sizes.
Mm-hmm. There's a question. So are these GDL, like, what's the tool? And the answer is yes. Chip's honed his skills and created some, tools that are using a lot of different parts of GDL. And I'll just point out, it's certainly within any ArchiCAD user's ability to create some basic GDL components. You can create your own custom component by simply drawing a bunch of things and saving it as an object. Then you can put it in again. You can, with only a little bit of expertise or a little bit of training, you can say, I want to choose between this versus that versus the third thing. You can have a little pop-up menu like he's got for individual parts of it. But what Chip's done is not only sort of integrated into a very elegant, clean system, with all of these different related choices, but he's also got some stretchy points, which, I know how to do that. It's not trivial to do as a programmer to put in, but it is so nice to have in terms of, having something that literally can be just reconfigured to suit your needs or your context. So good work. I do see, who was it who said, John Chando says, funny, I've been using a 10-year-old version of Chip's soffit tools. I found it on the web. Yeah, it would have been through probably Objects Online. Never knew who created it. Well, here you go. I see it has been much improved. We'll definitely buy the update. All right. So, all right. Rachel Duncan, to coordinate ducting and framing, Chip, do you use trace reference?
Yes. When I pull, I'll show the trace reference through the floors or what I'm using. Yeah, with the floor system.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. And Joe says, he assumes that Chip's cornice object will SEO to the roof.
SEO to the what?
To the roof. In other words, it'll be able to carve itself out of the roof as needed.
Yes, you can. I mean, it's an object, but I would do, if you wanted to carve back the rake, I'm guessing at the bottom, you can cut the rake
Well,
back.
some of what you had there seemed to be sticking into the roof, and you would just say, make this the operator and make the roof the target and just subtract.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So that's that's very straightforward. Okay. So I see the framing. Joe Archibald looked it up while we were on. So ArchVista has the framing tool. I'm guessing that maybe they took over the CAD image one. I'm not sure, or if they started from scratch, but that has to do with, well, it's archvista.com/product/archiframe, ARCHI frame. Anyway, that's for anyone who's interested in a framing tool. I don't know anything about it, whether it does just walls or if it does also other types. All right, so one of the things that, he says type it here. So let me copy, or I'll say, I'm gonna do thanks for the link, Joe. So I'm gonna respond to Joe, you should see his comment in your chat window, the link to that. Okay, and Geraldar says yes. Okay, now Scott says, Scott Buchanan says ArchiFrame is around 5K. So in other words, this is an expensive thing. It's not like just a little tool. So I'm not quite sure. Well, check it out if framing is something that you want to have the best possible tool. It probably is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now one of the things that I showed in my little advanced notice about today's session was your kitchen cabinet thing. And let's talk about your template and the things that speed up your work. You've talked about the objects. I mean, we've been looking at this cornice one particularly, and we've looked at some of the some things that related to the labeling of the roof pitches, which we can get back to. But let's look at your kitchen cabinets, because this is something that any ArchiCAD user can do if you want to. And in fact, Chip, I believe you said it would be okay for me to share a PDF so that people could just sort of look at the how you've got it laid out. So show us what you've got there.
Okay. Up here at the top, these are the standard ArchiCAD objects that ship with ArchiCAD. All I do is I go in first and set them up in all the toe kick heights, and then of course the height of the cabinets and the depths and all the perimeters. And then what I do is I put it in a section, and all these are just lines. So this is a graphical elevation view of this object with these settings. So now when somebody's working on a project, they can easily see by when they alt click, what we do is alt click to get those properties, that object is set to the same, all the parameters. So it's almost like a visual favorites, except by having them all, you can view them all quickly. It just makes a fast way to select, and also by showing this as a trace reference, you can be on your floor plan and show as trace references. So we can get back to
yeah. Can you just make a tiny kitchen, putting in 3 or 4 elements using that tool? Because I think when people see how it works, so I think the best way to do it is just to do the eyedrop from the trace reference of a few elements, and then go and select a group of elements from the worksheet, because that was very impressive, because you can have a group to speed up some of the common combinations of elements.
So typically what we would do is in this section, we would of course, you can move your reference around where you want it, but if you place it somewhere close, now you're able to start to work. So if I wanted to get these double cabinets here, I just click and then place. And then I want to put a corner cabinet, this is a corner cabinet, I click and place. So then I can move them to the location that I need them, connect them up. Again, if I want a bank of drawers, sit the bank of drawers down. Then I want to put like a double oven unit. Click that, place it next to it. Then I want to do some upper cabinets, so I'll go ahead and click upper cabinet, place it in. A little higher cabinet if I want to put that in between. And then once you place these, then we can easily go in and select and then change the length, to 3 foot here, and then if I want to mirror, to kind of close that cabinet out. So then what I would do is, now that I've got this base cabinet where I would probably put a sink here and I would put a double oven here, then I can right click and I could show trace reference of my plumbing. And then you can get your plumbing over. Let me pull that menu back up again. There we go. And then I'll move it to its location.
So just hold on a second. So just it went a little fast for some people. I know what you did. You went to your view map, you right-clicked on one of the worksheets, in this case for plumbing, and said show as trace reference. So now we've got a different set of elements that are right nearby, or within view, and now you can eyedrop. And the other thing I'm going to point out is that in many cases what a chip has is a live object that we're seeing in the plan representation, and then next to it an elevation view that's just line work, just so that you can sort of see what it is. He's eyedropping the one that's the plan view, and that's what he will place, whereas the the line work is just there for quick reference. And now all of those objects exist in the worksheet as 2D elements. They are not counted in the schedule because they're not actually part of the virtual building model. So that's cool. You can have a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't bog down the project. It doesn't attempt to show them in 3D. It doesn't list them, etc. But they carry all the parameters for when you do say, yeah, I want to put one of these into the model. So if we take a view in 3D of what you just created.
Let me get the. Sometimes it's finicky too. I'm doing an alt click and it just comes. I don't know if it's. I think it's probably to do with the, some of these keys not working when you got a web app going, another application going. Let me throw the double oven in real quick. And I'm just going back and forth on this one, but I've already set it.
So pretty impressive to see how quickly it can be assembled. Obviously, Chip knows all of his components inside and out, so he didn't have to go hunting. But in fact, knowing what he wants, he could go find it, and it was already set up with, essentially all the heights and other settings. Now, can you just show how you have a group of elements in that?
Yeah. So if we were in, again, go to my cabinets. In this, you could not use an eyedropper, of course. You're going to go into select. So, for instance, we have this island set up here, which is some back counter cabinets and some front cabinets. So in this scenario, you would just do a copy, right click copy or control C, what we do, and then control V, paste. And then now you would have that already set up with your open ends and all your settings.
So just to be, again, re-emphasize what Chip said, you can eyedrop individual elements. Excuse me. You can eyedrop individual elements, and then you've set the tool, the object tool in this case, to be ready to place one or possibly more than one of those elements. If you want to get a group of them, like that set of cabinets for the island, then you need to be in the worksheet or in whatever view has them and select them, copy it, and paste it. Now, in Master Template, which I think many of you know is a product that I created with an architect named Scott Bulmer back in 2007 and have continued to update. We pioneered, at least in terms of a sort of commercially available template, the concept of the interactive legend of having this kit of parts. Now, actually, I saw it being demonstrated by some users, and as I do every year, I look and say, well, this looks clever. Let me use it. Let me adapt it. Let me insert it. So what the whole concept here of having a kit of parts is just very, very powerful. So we're going to take a look at some other ones that Chip has set up. But one of the things that I really like is that you've got your groups really individually set up for the plumbing or for the cabinets, etc. And so you can easily sort of move them near your design and eyedrop them. And that is a very powerful way to work. And in fact, when I saw the cabinet thing that Chip did, I contacted him a couple of years ago, or maybe it's 3 years ago, and I got access to his materials. And although many of his things are custom and I wasn't able to bring those in, I did adapt it for the Graphisoft part. So in Master Template, we have a similar kitchen cabinet thing, just not as extensive. So you have some other other legends, other groups of elements that I thought were pretty interesting. You have whole sets of notes and you know,
Yeah,
other
I did.
things that you.
Yeah, and these are the electrical outlets that and it's the same thing. It's set to the height, which are again on the, you know, we have electrical element.
Mhm. So there's a question from Chake Silla saying, I thought you can only have 2D elements on a worksheet and not 3D. You can have objects and they exist in the worksheet as a 2D element, but they carry all their 3D information. So it's a way, I wouldn't say it's a way to get around it. It's just, it's one place where it's essentially you can have a 3D element in there. You cannot place in a worksheet a wall or a roof or a slab and have it be live, but you can place objects that are 2D in the worksheet, but when eyedropped or copied are 3D in the actual project. So Scott says, I was going to ask how detailed does it get on the cabinets? Are the general, or are they just general box sizes or actually built by what he puts on the plan?
We use the common box sizes. I don't have that show. If I do final work set, then all my labels start showing on what the cabinet sizes are. And
Okay, well, let's look at how are those labels being shown. That's this was one of the interesting things that puzzled me at first, and then Chip showed this.
What I've done is gone into the object itself and made a small edit. So if I open, let's see, library objects, open object. So what I've done is gone into one of these objects and go to the 2D setting, and then I just added the script right here, which is going to request window show dimension, which is the window show dim is the control setting in which ArchiCAD uses to show your windows, your window markers under your display settings. So by adding that bit of code to the object, then I'm able to show and hide my text depending on what my graphical view is. So if I do a final work set, of course it's going to show it. If I go to work set, final work set, no labels, then when I click it, then all my labels are going to disappear and they go back to their box form.
All right, so let me explain it again, since I think some people will not know what the heck is going on. The objects that in this particular case, Chip has made a copy of the Graphisoft object. So you can open up an object definition, which is different than the object settings. Object settings is what we use all the time. You know, you say, I want to change the dimension of it, or I want to change the material or surface or things like that. You can, when you select an element, you can say open object from that library submenu. And then you can see some programming code. Now, in general, that's not very user-friendly, but you can go in there. You can go and save a copy of it for your own use in your own projects. And then once you've saved a copy of it, you can go and edit it. Now, the GDL coding that Chip has put in was the label was already there, right? It was already available in the Graphisoft part.
Well, this was one of Neil McCann's objects way back in the day, and then what I do is anytime that I add to the code, that's what I do is I'll exclamation point it out, which is this is omits whatever's in this exclamation point, and I put added, so that way I kind of keep track of what I add, and in this case scenario I did put I added the text
Oh, okay.
Text script in here.
All right. So the text then is basically something, so Chip has added something that writes some text, essentially makes text visible on the plan, and controls whether it's visible based on looking at the model view option that turns window markers on or off. So you know how on certain drawings you're going to show the window markers, and in other drawings you're not going to show the window markers. And he said, well, in general, if I am not showing the window markers, I'm probably having a simpler view of this whole thing, and I don't need to see the cabinet sizes. But in my detailed working drawing, when I'm showing the window markers, I want to show the cabinet markers as well. So this is in the model view options, and it's basically the script is just checking to see if window markers are showing. You can see if you switch between those up above that the little preview changes, and so it's just looking for that. Now, the way that you would do something similar in terms of without doing custom programming is you would put labels for these elements that would be on a separate layer. So that would be the simplest thing, is just essentially label the element with text and put it on a layer that you turn the layer on and off depending upon your needs. What you've got there is the text automatically determined from the size, or is it manually typed in?
No, it's automatic. So if I go into final work set and took this cabinet here, and I wanted to change the width to 3'6", so it changes to 42, 24, 36.
Okay, so you've got a script that's determining the text. Can you just show that for people who are expert in GDL and for others just to sort of get a quick glimpse? Where is the text number being calculated?
Well, I've got it shown in the parameters here under product model, which is this is what it's returning. But in the script, I think it's in the 2D. It's been many years since I've been in here, so bear with me. Show one detail. Yeah, here's the text too, and then this is the unique identifiers, the hotspots to be able to stretch the object. But this is where it is. Add to a divided by this.
How does it know when you choose the pop-up of the size that the text should be 24 when you choose 2 feet 0?
It's just defined in the style here. That little bit right there.
Okay, so you're picking up the size and using a formatting thing that says, hey, show it as inches. Show it as
yes, I think that is. Did I put it in the? No, I think it's all in the 2D. And like I said, it's been years since I've been into this.
Right.
This
yeah. So
here we go. Here it is. Call. So now that's the call parameters. Call left side.
Okay. So I think probably since this is over the head of 95% of the people who'll see this, we won't go any deeper there. But GDL can do a lot of different controls for visibility, for placement, for sort of displaying, translating things, just like from feet and inches to metric or from feet and inches to inches, things like that. All right, let's see. Go into some other question. Dave Olafs, you were placing electrical outlets. It looked like with one move and you were able to rotate them 90 degrees. How did you do that? Okay.
R. Hotkeys. D I use for drag. R I use for rotate.
Okay, so basically it's the rotate command, and you didn't see him select the command, he just used a keyboard shortcut.
Correct, keyboard hotch.
Yeah, okay, and Glenn says, can you share that script? So this would be, I imagine the script we're talking about right now is the one that controls whether the text is going to be seen based on the window marker. Is that something that we can share, Chip?
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, it's right here. This
all right. So I'll copy that into something that will be available on the ArchiCAD user site.
Yeah, because all you're doing is a request. You're bringing in a request and what you're requesting from. So anytime you have text somewhere, if you add that, you know, in front of that argument, then you'll be able to control the view to be visible or not visible.
Yeah. So okay. So Scott says, so this is not an out of the box feature. It must be coded into the object. Yeah. Some of the stuff that Chip does is not out of the box. The good news is that ArchiCAD is extensible by users or by experts to do more things than what Graphisoft provides. The bad news is you don't have his part, so you don't have that. But certainly it's not a problem to label the cabinets and turn them on and off when you want it. That's not a problem. It's just if you want to do it as fast as Chip, then you have to, you know, use some things that are not out of the box. Okay. Scott says, I'm trying to get away from Ruby script. So Scott actually does do some scripting he's just switching over from chief architect now. All right, Steve Trube says, well done, Chip and Eric. Thanks very much for presenting. Maybe he's heading off, I don't know. Do you sell these cabinets? Pretty cool. So the cabinets that we're seeing here, sometimes you use Graphisoft ones, but the ones that we're seeing right here are from Neil McCann and Dimensions Design Group Inc. I believe DDG Inc.
Yeah, GGI, something like that.
Yeah, so I'll put a link to their website. Neil is a longtime developer of ArchiCAD add-ons, although I haven't seen much in recent years, but he did create some really powerful things back in the day, and they probably are still available and still updated. Okay, all right, template structure. I do want to get into that, and more thanks here. Paul says a comment, Paul Adams, Graphisoft should have labels like that on all library parts. I'm often adding stray text to label them. Yeah, certainly Graphisoft over time has added more labeling options, but there's always more room for improvement. So let's take a look at your template structure. So we've been looking at a project. We've been looking at some of the worksheets that are so powerful. Let's just flip through the worksheets. Just okay. In general, these worksheets are in your template. So in other words, when you start a new project, they're just sitting there. So let's just go through them one at a time briefly.
Okay. Let me turn all layers on, that will show it everything. Let me turn off the trace reference again. Again, this is our checklist that I use. Miscellaneous details are kind of the special notes that we may use for maybe skirting, and we'll do an isometric view with notes. Again, this is what we will scale down to fit in whichever detail we want to use. We have electrical, use our typical electrical, and then this is some of the people that we that work for us is not in the United States, so we'll put a lot of the our code requirements, so if they even need a reference, it's great to be able to have it in the project than them trying to reference something outside and having to look up, so it kind of makes it easy there. Let's see, that's our appliance. This is our typical one that we use for our appliances. Then we have our cabinets.
So again, you have plan representations that can be eye-dropped and elevations. Now to create those elevations, you showed me, you don't have to do this again. You basically, at some point or another, you place these elements onto a plan, you take a section or an elevation marker, take a view of it, and then just copy that line work and paste it in here, and of course line it up neatly so that it's clear.
Yeah, these are all just exploded, pretty much exploded lines from the elevation view, pasted back into the floor plan, and then I just place them above it so we're kind of see which one it is. Now some of these objects are the same, but they've been changed by settings. So I would do a copy of that. So you may have, like in this case scenario, I may use the dishwasher for an ice maker, for under counter refrigerator. It'd be the same object. It's simpler that way. But these settings are set up to where the text will change and the dimensions will be matched. So it makes it quicker to set. Washer and dryer, that's one of our objects that we do, that we've created. We do a stackable unit or a front load. Our cabinets, again, a lot of times we will utilize the group of objects that will create the elevation of the cabinets, and then we'll also make a generic dimensioned and note and all of our notes, and then again this would be something that we would place on a plan and then box it out to only show it on that sheet of this template.
So that by the way, the red X's there, for some people won't quite know what these are because you aren't using it. Those are hotspots. They're done with the hotspot tool, which is in the more group of tools. Can you just show that in your toolbox, the more group? So that more group there, the hotspot, basically a hotspot is a non-printing snap point. And what you're using that for in this case is to say, when you place this view in a layout sheet, you want to crop it to the boundaries of where those X's are, and that way it'll fit neatly into a grid on your layout sheet. So it's purely for convenience in this case for layout purposes, but you can also have hotspots that help you to align things, in 3D elements too. So.
We've set everything up on a Pacific grid with this creates our margin for our columns and rows, and then we have an overlap margin to where if it doesn't happen to fit, then we've got a fallback. So then once we start getting uniform with all of our sizing, then once we start placing them on the sheet, then they go in a lot easier and be able to fit it in nice and neat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, carry on.
And of course, too, we always do a spline, a circle, and a fill with, and then a generic note. So that way, when we're on the cabinet layer and we want to make a curved line or a circle for some reason, and we want to make sure it's on the right layer, we always note that in reference to our independent sheet. So therefore, when we have other people working outside the office, then they're not scrambling around trying to find out, where do I, what do I put a note that's referencing a cabinet? Well, if we put a template note here, then all they have to do is alt click it, and then they can start placing it. And then if they want to change the name, then of course they can change the name and so on and so forth. Plumbing is the same thing. Have a lot of reference here. And then as you'll see, we always carry that over on every one of our worksheets. And then these are, I think all of these are ArchiCAD objects, these showers, and then all I've done is gone in and edit to place the text. Then we have a site plan objects that we use, symbols. Again, this is when we start doing our cornice details. We kind of group them out by our pitch line. That's an object, and then in that way, if depending on the construction of the cornice, then we would, they could come around and select all these elements and copy and paste onto their cornice detail that they're currently working in, and then they can just alt click and then delete the text when they're done, and it just makes it a lot faster with running through doing cornice details. And then of course we use our typical, all of our notes, framing, just really standard common text that we use over and over again. And then we show examples of, how we place it. And then our notes section.
By the way, the slope thing, the 10 and 12, can you just go back to that? Is that automatically calculated, or is that just?
It's just an object. So when you pull, we've created a simple object where we can just, change the pitch. And then depending on, we have a multiplier here. If we want to make it a lot larger, if it's on, if you keep it on 1, it's a pretty good size for a 1/4 inch scale. But if you get up to 1/2 inch or 3/4 scale, then you may want to bump that up to a multiplier, and all it does is just multiply the size.
So this is a smart part that you created.
Yeah, it's just one I did on the fly.
Right. Yeah, I can see it's clever and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then of course our notes, again, as you can see, those hotspots again are on that same grid pattern that was even on the cabinets that we showed earlier. And then these are just typical, maybe a wall fill composite legend, flooring legend. And then anytime that we add a new composite, new fill or anything, it always goes, this is kind of like the up above here is kind of like the junk catcher, because we always, we may be working on one project and we create a composite at the same time where we've got 2 or 3 other projects going and they may need it. So instead of trying to chase down which computer created it and who added it to the library, we'll go back to this master notes, copy and paste it, save it, and then all the other computers that are open this file that has this reference, it's going to say, would you like to update the reference file? And when they do, it will bring in all those properties and everybody's up to date with the new field, composite, complex profile, line, anything that we have custom.
So before you go on, can you just go to the Hotlink manager and let's take a look at that, and while you have it open, I'll just explain in a way that I think people will understand just a little better than what you said. Makes perfect sense to me and to many of the people, but for newer people it needs a little more explanation. So a hotlink in ArchiCAD, if you haven't worked with them, is a way of referencing in another file, another ArchiCAD file, typically, although in maybe this past year in 21, you can now hotlink in an IFC file, which would be a 3D model from maybe a structural engineer. When you reference it in, it basically, you can't edit it. You can move it around. You can make multiple copies. It's commonly used for things like a unit type in an office or a condo or a hotel, because when you change the design, it actually updates all of the copies. And you can also reference in an entire building into a site and maybe have several buildings modeled in separate project files and then put into the site. Now, what Chip is doing here is he's referencing in groups of elements that, as we've seen, are, let's say in many cases, they're in a worksheet. So you can place a hotlink into a worksheet. Now, one reason he's doing this is that he can then update in the office that source file, put in some more complex profiles or put in some other things. And when it's referenced into his files, it's always kept up to date. Now, this is exactly what Tim Ball does. So if you were on the January session or watched the recording of it, is he's always got his working project and his template open at the same time. The template hotlink is what he will always make sure if he makes a new wall type, he puts it into the template file or the hotlink and then references it in, and that way it keeps everything in sync. So it's a very powerful way to make sure that the whole office has the same standards and that the work you do in one project can be easily leveraged in other ones.
Here's one. I'll just do one real quick. Here's a 2x10. I've created a duplicate of a 2x10 exterior. So if I hit OK, I want to change this to 9.5. Okay. So now when I hit OK, what I first do is go ahead and draw it. So what I'll normally do is come down here and copy this down. And even though that walls do not come in visually, but they do, the properties do come in. So then I would change this to, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Let's see. That's the exploded version. There we go. I always have graphic representation and I have the model representation. So this is a wall. So I'll go ahead and go to the 2x10. There it is, 2x10 exterior. So now I've created a 2x10 exterior. And then once I save that, I can go back to my model and then master and then hit update. Hit OK. So now when I go to my walls, should have did the drawings. Oh.
You're in complex profiles. You need to change it to composite.
Yeah, here we go. I was like, I'm getting, here we go. So there it is. There now the 2x10 exterior new composite that I just created in the other file is now up to date and I can start using it in the new drawing. So if you've got remote users and you're saying, hey, we need to implement this new wall, and you've got people working on different projects and you want everybody to have this new wall created in your master, your Hotlink external reference file, and save it. And then when they open, the next time they open the project, or tell them to check status, and it'll say that it needs to be updated. And once they update it, then everybody's going to have the new wall composite or note, or just about everything. Everything I've seen. The only thing I can't do is windows and doors, because those do not come over at all.
So let me answer a few questions here, and we're getting close to the 2-hour mark, which is sort of my target to finish up, although we could run a few minutes over. Rich Matthews says, how do you approach updating the template for every new version? I mean, how big a deal is it? What's the general way that you approach that?
Long time ago, it was a huge headache. But now I've seen ArchiCAD as it's been growing. It's been getting much more tighter with their new releases. That makes it a lot simpler updating. But of course, when you're dealing, of course, with composites, things of that nature, there's not anything really. They're just core elements that you combine to make a new element. So I don't think you're going to find too much. When you go from version to version, that anything's going to get lost in conversion.
Okay, so let me elaborate just a tiny bit, Chip. Since I have got master template, which we maintain and develop every year for the updated version, when you migrate a project or a template from one version to the next, ArchiCAD generally does a pretty good job of just making it look the way it did before. You do need to then switch your library from ArchiCAD 21 to 22, for example, and for the most part, everything will come across. It'll actually find the matching 22 part, and it'll be using that. Now, of course, Chip's got custom parts. Those essentially he just is using the same ones maybe every so often something gets updated or changed, but the parts are forward compatible, no problem there. Now, where we have issues that take time are two different things. One is when Graphisoft introduces a whole new system, like for example in ArchiCAD 17, when the whole idea of building materials was added, it
Yeah.
required a lot of careful reworking of things because composites no longer were made up of a bunch of fills, they were made up of a bunch of building materials, which looked like fills in a section, but actually had more data related to them. So that took a lot of work. When Graphisoft added things like properties into ArchiCAD in version, was it 19 or 20, then, there were things that didn't exist before. And so, if you're working with a template, you need to sort of import them. Sometimes, like with version 17, I totally rebuilt master template from scratch because there were some core things that changed, and I just thought, I'm not going to take any chances here. I want to take Graphisoft's parts, Graphisoft's template, and just make it master template. But most of the time what I'll do, and I'm sure you're doing this, Chip, as well, is move the template forward and then bring in the smart stuff from Graphisoft that didn't exist, tweak it as needed, and then just keep going. Now, we have a bunch of comments like, hey, this guy is unbelievable. So you've got some there. This is an amazing webinar. Thank you so much, super helpful. Do you sell this part, Rachel Duncan? I'm not sure which one you're referring to. Maybe it has to do with the cabinet stuff. So obviously you sell certain things, other things you've just adapted from somebody else's things, so you can't give it away.
Yeah.
But sometimes a little scripting thing can be, just share it as a snippet. Michael Krause asked, do you find the worksheet approach works better than using favorites? And I'm just going to jump in and say they're both useful. Favorites used to be very limited because they were just a text list, and they would get very long, and you'd be hard to tell what was what because it was just a long list. When Graphisoft made the visual favorites, the graphic favorites, made it so much better. But still, seeing the element in plan and in an elevation and being able to have groups of elements, the worksheet provides some really interesting options that just aren't in Graphisoft's parts. So I use both. They each have places where you'll find it more useful. So let's see. Again, John Dunham says, I thought you couldn't have 3D info in worksheets. You cannot have 3D info, but you can have objects that in the worksheet are 2D, but carry 3D info when you eyedrop them or copy them. Okay. Georgiana says, so for updating the object libraries in a new version, how do you carry over your properties to the new versions of each object? Does it automatically update when you migrate libraries? Generally, if you have things that are favorites or elements, let's say you have a project with a bunch of stuff drawn and you switch it to the new version of ArchiCAD. If you use the old library, everything stays the same. If you migrate to the new library, it will generally, anything that Graphisoft considers an identical part, in other words, they didn't change it, will carry over everything perfectly. Anything that Graphisoft considers a revised part, it will leave your reference in the old part. It will not change it. Years and years and years ago, I'm talking going back ArchiCAD 5 days, I remember there were some disasters where they changed some stuff in library parts and had it automatically migrate, and people said, wait a second, I'm getting black cabinets. Wait a second, some things are not printing the right way and I'm on deadline. And they decided we have to be smart and say the 90% of the library that didn't change will migrate, and the 10% or whatever it is that had a change, we'll leave it up to you to do that. So they avoided liability, and but generally it's pretty quick.
So one thing I'll add is, and you may have a tip for me on this one, is when I'm migrating or updating ArchiCAD, like say for instance version 20 to 21, and all of my old objects on my worksheets are version 20, and then I go to version 21, what I normally do is go in, load both libraries, which is the old version, the migrated version, and the new version. And then what I do is I open up each one of those objects, and then I do an alt click within the object library to inject, or do the shift click to inject the selected one back into the selected one into the new object, and then it updates the object to a 21. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So
Okay.
can you just open up just to demonstrate this, because I'm sure for a lot of people the words were too much. Can you open up just in the object library, for simplicity, open up a standard Graphisoft cabinet. So this is the best way to demonstrate it.
Let's see, I've got 20 and 21, so that would be, we could do furnishings in it. I hardly ever go in here. Let's see.
You could type into the search in the top cabinet, and then just pick a standard one of those cabinets. Well, actually, pick one that's
here's two. It's 21 and 18. So if I did an 18 one, is that what you want to do?
All right, that's fine. And then go to the 3D preview of it, so we can see. Now, just for now, change the top surface to a totally different color. You know, like a red or a marble, or something like that. Not the model there, but in the parameters for the surfaces. Okay, so take the counter and just make it something totally different. All right, now it's got a countertop style, it's gotten certain data. If we were to just normally click on that other one, don't do it yet. If you were to click on the other one, it would pick up the default settings. It would go back to what Graphisoft says is the neutral settings. But if hold down your Alt Control for the syringe, and you see the syringe, when he clicks on it, you see it looks just the same, but in the top, you notice that it says cabinet-based chamfer 21. So what it did was it said, I'm going to carry over all the shared parameters, all the ones that have the same name, all the ones that I can match, and I'll just move it over to it. So it's now the element that's in this settings dialog is now referencing a different part, but it's carried that over. Now, from this one, go and click on, let's say, cabinet base corner 21 or one of the other ones, eyedrop or syringe on that. So you can see the size is a little odd because the size maybe got confused, but it's still got that same corner, same cabinet surface. So you can actually go from one similar part to another. Cabinets would be the common thing, or from one window to another. So let's say you have a slider window and you want to switch it to a fixed window. You can use the syringe to switch it, and it'll keep the casing, the surfaces, the overall dimension, all of those things constant. So that's called parameter transfer within a library part, or within a library object settings window. And it's done using the keyboard shortcut for the syringe. And so that's a very powerful tool in general if you want to switch windows from one type to another, or use a setting that you've set up for a cabinet and put in a different type of cabinet but have the same style. And you can use it for migrating from one version to another as well. Now, a question from John Rulon or David Rulon is, does it permanently change the library part? No, all you're doing is you're saying the selected element, which maybe is on the plan, or the settings, which is the default for what you're going to drop in next, that's what you're affecting. You're not affecting the definition of a library part. You're just essentially carrying over some style information to the settings dialog that you're going to be placing into the model. Michael Krause asks, can you open and show your Hotlink manager? So if we can go back into there, because I think we opened it, but then we didn't really, so your external content there. All right, so you've got a bunch of Hotlink sources. Most of them are worksheets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're
Yes.
basically in each worksheet, he's got things from his template or things from your reference files. You've got a whole folder of these separate little groups of elements, the appliances or the furniture, the plumbing, etc. So each of those, if Chip adds a new element or a bunch of things to it, they just show up in the project in this off to the side in the worksheet. Um, so David Lohmeyer says, looking forward to your objects for sale. So you're going to have some buyers from this. So that's nice. But if you do want to get a template that has the legends, not some of the smart cornice parts and things that are very specific to Chip, but if you just want have this sort of interactive legends, you can get Master Template because it's got essentially these concepts baked in. Dan Wyckoff says, do you avoid using any of the library parts that ship with ArchiCAD, or do you make your own versions of those that you keep from getting overwritten?
Good question. I like my own objects. I've carried and it's just because of the changes. I guess wearing my old hat coming up, when they were making drastic changes and one version things would work and another version things wouldn't work. I used to luckily, and I'll tell you this story on the Rafter plan. I used to edit every rafter in the roof wizard, and I would have to explode the library and then make a new IFC in order for the rafter wizard to work with taking into account my edits that I did in order to have text to show up for the rafter links. And lo and behold, they implemented the text rafter length and my headaches were gone. So I was thankful that they did that. So I no longer have to edit the roof wizard.
Okay. So we're at the 2-hour mark. Is there anything that you haven't shown us that's in the template that, we would miss out on if you didn't bring up? We looked at a bunch of worksheets. Awesome stuff. The notes, typical boilerplate notes that you either bring in directly onto layout sheets or you use as eyedroppers. There. What else do you have in the typical template file?
We were at symbols, and then we went into the notes master, and then of course I do one for furniture, which is I've got a group of furniture that I use that I'll throw in, and that's for my BIMX reviews that I'll send to my clients. And furniture just gives more scaling when they walk through, when they can see a bed. Then let's see, that's about it as far as on my files. I always have a independent CAD file where if I'm utilizing any other CAD software, then I'll do an overlay versus trying to bring it in, and lo and behold, I have every layer and everything associated with it.
So this is sometimes you bring in some DWG files into into this worksheet. Okay, and
but yeah, that's that pretty sums it up of what I cover.
Your schedules? We haven't looked at schedules.
Oh yeah, well that is
Yeah.
I've done all of my schedules to work with the objects that I use, so are created. So if I went into, for example, I'll do my cornice schedule. Let's see. Here we go. So it breaks it down to what type of corner. If it's flat, if it's a Greek return, it gives you the overhang, the length. If you're using blocking or trim, shingle strip, freeze, fascia, it breaks it all down and it gives you the total lineal foot. Floor finish fills, so slabs is the one I use now, and that's what we were showing earlier. with using the slab tool and the fields, which it'll read off those fields. The rafters, the lifts rafters. Oh yeah, I deleted that. Deleted the. If I go back into floor plan, so I think we were going through that. If I go to rafter, right now my rafter list, as you can see, is pretty blank. So what I've done here is when I go to my label tool, I'll set my label tool up, go to my label, set my label to rafter, and then I go to label rafter dialog, and I will choose the rafter label, which is, you see, is blank, and then I hit OK. Now when I select tools, select all my rafters, then I click associate label selection element and click that, and of course it'll work. But then you think, well, nothing happened. Well, that's where I was saying I extrapolate the information from the rafters, so that when I go into my rafter list, now they'll populate by the 2x10, the 2x6, and then the pitch, and of course existing or all that information. So that's how I generate my rafter cut list.
Now that that was magic, and we didn't see anything up his sleeve, but we have some very smart programming going on there. So I think this is something I want to dig into for 3 or 4 minutes. Go to your scheme settings. So basically what Chip has there is he's saying list anything that's on the rafter.raf layer. All right. And then he's saying, you know, show the quantity of these things. Now the rafter rough length, rafter pitch, etc. What are those? Those are parameters that are being, in this case, the labels we're calculating from the rafters. So in other words, he said, I'm going to select all these rafters. I'm going to apply a label to them. So let's go to the to your plan and make sure that the labels are visible.
Well, the labels are not visible. They're hitting.
They're hidden. Why are they hidden right now?
Because there's not any two-dimensional information to show when the rafter is returning the length. You know, the rafter is already returning this length. So.
But you said label the elements, which created the bunch of labels. Where are those labels living?
They're attached, but they're not. There's no 2D code. All I'm doing is using the calculations in order to connect to the object. So,
all right, so the labels are not visible, but can you go to the label tool and select all labels?
Right here?
No. Just if you activate the label tool in your toolbox and say Control A for select all labels.
Oh, Control.
All right, now you see there's a bunch of dots there. So this is where the magic happens, is that Chip has said label. Now, starting in maybe version 19, I can't remember when it was, you can now label elements more than one time. You can say, I want to label it on this side, and I want to have another label over on this area. So you can label things multiple times. In this case, he's applied an invisible label that just, you know, on plan has just a dot. But if you select just one of them, if you can hover over one of them and just select just the one. And open up the settings. So this is a label. Normally labels are used to put annotation. And so they show some information on the plan. But in this case, it's a script that says, I'm going to look at the element you've attached me to. I'm looking at this rafter, and I'm going to do some calculations. Now, if you can you just go back to the plan, and with the label selected, open up the label settings and go to the parameters.
The
Are you hiding the parameters from view in the symbol label?
Yeah, I mean, that's all there is that I have shown.
All right, so you're not, oh, no. Here we have font sizes and then Rafter rough length. Okay, here's where we're seeing some stuff. So without going into the script, what Chip has done is he said, all right, if I attach this label to a rafter, it's going to look at the length of that rafter, which it can pull, just like you can label things and say, what type of wall is this or whatever. It's pulling data from the rafter. It's then doing a little simple calculation, I mean, relatively simple, saying, let me write this up in a way that's a nominal length, or there's a rough length, and then there's the rafter pitch there. So that text you can't edit directly. It's being controlled by the script. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pulling from, because it's associated to the object, then it's pulling the label's doing the calculation, but pulling the information from the object. So with the Rafter label here, this is where the script, see, and I've taken all the 2D information out. So under the parameters, this is where I'm running the if statements for the pitch, and then I'm doing the length, and I'm doing the arguments to pull back the length,
Yes.
and then this is what's going to be.
Basically, if the length is between this and that, then put a nominal length in. If it's between the next value set, put the next length in. So just like, someone who's a contractor who's doing a cut list, they're just going to measure things and they're going to say, we need a 12 footer, we need a 16 footer or whatever. Now this is this a part that you sell or that you can share with?
Yeah, I'll share this. I mean, I give no warranty to it, but it's free. I'll give it to you, and anybody that wants to try implementing this is more than welcome to do that. And the roof plate line as well. The pitch in the roof line.
Right. Okay. So I think this is a good place to finish up. Let's see if there's any last questions. No, there's one about the color chart on the worksheet. We could look at that for a moment. Marie says, is there a difference between exporting composites, materials, etc., from the attribute manager as compared to using Hotlink from the external reference? There are more controls in attribute manager, but it's a manual process. Hotlinks will automatically update. So that's a very short answer. So this HHD label is a custom label that Chip created, yes. And can we show how to create it? No, because there's basically what Chip did was create something and script it. You can create custom labels, but to make something smart like this, you saw the lines of text. David Lohmeyer says, hey, Chip, pretty awesome workflow. How large is your practice?
Well, 4 strong.
So 4 people getting done a whole bunch of work because of the efficiencies. Can you finish with that one visual thing, which is the worksheet that had the layer list with all of the squares that turn on and off depending upon the layer combination? I thought this, I have created a version of this in Master Template years ago, but I did it in Excel and it was a bear. And when I saw what you did, I went, oh, that makes so much sense. So go ahead and show that worksheet.
Where's that at now? Go to the worksheets.
In your worksheet that had the layer listing in colors, so it might have been somewhere in your cabinet. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me get to the master. This.
Okay, there we go. All right, so just fill the screen with that. So basically, when you switch a layer combination, just like you would at any point, you'll see this change. Now think about it, all of you who are watching. if you took the time to create a grid and colored every square based on a certain layer, or put it on a certain layer, and then had another version that was gray when that would be for other layers. So that's what you've got, right? You've got how many on top of each other? How many you have as many squares as you have layers?
No, a lot of that stays gray.
So when you switch the layer combination, let's just zoom in on the very top left corner so we can just sort of see. All right, so where it's floor plan and it's red under walls interior dot FLP, if you were to select, I guess this is a worksheet, so we can't really move things around. But how many things are stacked underneath that red?
Oh, it's only one color block that's here. So if it's either an on or an off switch, just like room labels. So if I was in foundation, room labels would not be showing. If I went to electrical, they would not be showing. If I go to floor plan, they would show.
Oh, so you have a grid that's gray for a lot of things, and then you just have the squares that are on a layer, and if the layer is showing, then you see it.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's great. Now, why would you do this? The answer is if you or someone else wants to see if a certain layer is visible on a certain layer combination, visually it works, and you can sort of say, where should I put, what would be a typical question? Where should I put something? Which layer should I put notes for the Rafter planner or things like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they would go, this one serves as a purpose to when I've got this hot linked in. So say for instance, if I pulled up a version 18 or 16 PLN file, then I would then reference this new hot link to the old version, which didn't have this here. From a quick glance, when I started doing layer combinations, you would see where these check boxes would show, but not the layer, not these individual components associated to the layer would be visible. So you'd start seeing those blank pockets where things should be showing that are not showing. So then you could easily go down through doing your Control L, or which is what I do, is pull my layer, and then I can easily identify how to update my layer combinations to work as I'm pulling in the new worksheets from cabinets, for instance. Because if you set your worksheet for cabinet layer back in version 18, and then version 21, you ended up naming it cabinets with an S, then when you started using combination layers that would turn off cabinet layer, then it would start messing you up when you like place the electrical combination layer on your sheet. Well, by a quick glance, you could start seeing, okay, well, you could see which layer combinations didn't pull over that match the new system. So some of your cabinets may reflect a version 18, but then you start adding new cabinets to the working drawing. So then you start using 21 version cabinets. Well, some of them are going to be referencing the new layer. Then you still have some old layer systems coming in. So now you need to get those layer combinations to where they're both showing. And this is just a quick way to see visually what's happening within the layers, the layer visual.
Okay, so really,
that's a mouthful.
yeah. So I think essentially there are two purposes. One is to sort of understand better what's going on, and the other is to do error checking, or just make sure that you don't have an issue in terms of your layer combinations. So I'll take a look at this a little bit more since you were kind enough to share with me a live version of the file, so I can see if I understand a couple more of the intricacies. But we've been going to 2.25 hours. Chip, fantastic work, and thank you so much for your generosity of time sharing this. I'm glad that you'll actually have a little bit of compensation in terms of people wanting to buy some of your stuff. And of course, with your permission, I'll distribute a few things that people will benefit from, as well as steal, with your permission, perhaps a few ideas for master template. Um, so, all right. So I see Scott saying, no way, this is insane. So I'm not sure what he's referring to, but he's like obviously very impressed. Maybe Scott, you can type in what it was that you thought was awesome. Maybe it was the cut list thing. What are the green pluses for? The green pluses.
Oh, those are just the main flags that it is an on position. I guess, I always think of plus and minus. So I just did the plus.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so we just got a bunch of awesome and, amazing and, Chip, we are so impressed. Thank you. So, all right. So, great stuff. I'm so excited to be able to share your work with ArchiCAD users. We'll finish up for now. If you have some follow-up questions about ArchiCAD stuff, send them to support@bobrow.com. As always, I love to help ArchiCAD users be more successful with the program. Offer stuff for free, like this presentation. Offer stuff you can pay for if you want to get training, or if you want to get master template. With the ArchiCAD user site, one way I'm sort of trying to do both things, in other words, free and make a living, is that this presentation will be available for free for the next month, and then it'll go into the vault where you have to be a paying member. And for a very small monthly amount, you can be a paying member and get access to previous webinars, as well as some of the downloads there. So you can support my work, make sure that I can afford to do this this work. So I want to thank you all. We had, I think, close to 200 people attending today, and I'm sure there'll be a few hundred more who will watch this over the next few weeks. So Chip, awesome stuff. Want to shake your hand, high five. And anything I can do for you, Chip, certainly. There are probably a couple of little things that I will just go over with you that I noticed that maybe are going to help with your efficiency. But if there's anything I can help you with, let me know.
Oh yeah, awesome, man. And definitely you have with some of the other previous videos that I've seen. It's just those little things that you never know. You get so you're working in one direction so long. Sometimes you get blinders, and then when somebody says, "Hey, use the key here," make things so much easier. So I appreciate it.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. Yeah, more and more comments. So will the whole video be posted? Yes. So assuming the recording worked, which I generally seems to be pretty reliable with GoToWebinar, I'll be posting it on my YouTube channel, as well as on the front page of ArchiCAD User for the next few weeks. And then when we have the next webinar, in a month, then it'll go into the members only area. Yeah, this will be available probably by tomorrow. So Chip, thank you again. Have a good evening. I guess it's already dinner time for you.
Yeah, going on 5:30.
Right. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. I'm gonna just copy these comments here. So don't leave the webinar just for a moment. I have to just make sure that I get these comments. Let me just, because when we quit the webinar, then they disappear from the standard view here. Actually, let me just one more thing. So this will Nothing much to see here for you guys, but I'm going to copy all the comments so we have a record of them here. All right, it's copying it. And here we go. All right. Take care, Chip. Take care, everybody.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.